Angelo and Jimmy with you for our final installment of the 2025 NFL Draft miniseries, the draft review. Jimmy, I mean, I know that we started this project really quickly and turned it around really quickly, but I feel like we were doing those shows for a long time. I can't believe the draft's already gone. I had two different hairstyles. I decided to get a haircut during the middle of a series that was 2 weeks long. So, we'll definitely get that fixed for next year. But ultimately, I'm so excited for the draft every year. It's finally gone. And I gotta say, like, even though I thought the first round was a little boring, I thought there were several teams that did really well and changed the fortunes of their franchise. What are your initial thoughts, and just how are you feeling now that it's the last episode of this little mini series we're doing?
One, it's been a ton of fun doing all of these and diving into the draft. Like I've said on the last couple of episodes, this is the most I've looked into a draft ever. Like normally I'll follow it, I'll know a little bit like the main guys, but to have to go through and actually dive into like a top five at each position, I think I'm hooked now. I think I'm going to have to do something like this every single year for the draft. But like you said, the first round was kind of I think it's because 18 of the top or of the first round picks were interior picks. And it's not that they're boring, but they kind of are. Like you don't see as many of the big boomer bust in that where it's like, ooh, they took this receiver that ran a 4.2, but he's unproven in college. Like we didn't see a ton of that in the first round. They were just like, these are solid picks. A couple were potential projects, but for the most part, yeah, it was kind of just one of, besides the trade at the top and the sliding of one player that we may get into. I guess we could talk about that. That was kind of a big story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we'll get to the linemen later and some of our thoughts on those. I thought that this was a draft kind of desperate at the top for linemen once we got to a certain point, but maybe we'll get into that in a moment. But the number one story of the draft was obviously Shador Sanders falling to the fifth round in a draft where he was kind of consensusly the number two quarterback in this class, and through much of the draft cycle was positioned to be one of only two surefire first round picks. Well, he was far from surefire in this draft, going on day three, dropping to round five, reminiscent of guys in the past that have dropped, like Sam Howell of North Carolina, Malik Willis of Liberty, Connor Cook of Michigan State, and many more that have drafted during the cycle. But Shador Sanders had a lot more publicity attached to his history and his kind of the war that got into it in terms of the media about it being less about a player and more about a culture, more about how football is supposed to be, more even a black and white issue it got into. And it seemed to get really ugly during the process. And his precipitous fall was not safe from the ire that came from not only Mel Kiper, of course, but from the general public as
Oh yeah.
well. I think that Shador fell probably too far. I think he certainly fell too far due to his talent. And I'll get into a couple of teams that I thought that should have swooped him up at some point that I'm surprised didn't. But I think that the one thing there's two things that really go with it, in my opinion. The first one is the examples that I just gave in terms of Sam Howell, in terms of Malik Willis, in terms of Connor Cook, in terms of even Jimmy Clausen going to the second round. Mel Kiper, big miss, but a lot of guys missed on him. I think one of the things that I think's ugly online is when you want to combat someone, you try to kind of go low. Like, yeah, Mel Kiper missed on Jimmy Clausen. We all miss on things. We're all wrong about things.
Yeah.
I do think he should be chided for I will retire if he's bad and then he never did. That I'll make fun of him for. Not for being wrong
Yeah.
about Jimmy Clausen, but for making an empty promise and then just pretending like it
Yeah.
never happened. But those situations have happened in the past, and especially with high profile quarterbacks that we have seen. Shador just happens to be the most nationally high profile. It's not just NFL draft high profile, it's national high profile that this happened. Even Matt Barkley, another example, a five-star number one overall
Yep.
guy in the Jimmy Clausen mold, dropped to the fourth round. These things happen to star quarterbacks. Quinn Ewers in this draft, who we'll probably get to in a little
Oh
bit.
boy.
But the second thing was, and I think the most divisive issue is, do we want, quote unquote, that kind of guy in our locker room? And I think that people, excuse me, I'm having technical difficulties like I did on an episode before. Hopefully that breaks the, oh, goodness gracious, Jimmy. Why did this happen? Why does this happen to me? Why me of all people? Um, the situation was, do we want this in our locker room? And I think that that is the number one thing that the media took and tried to splinter amongst the fans of the NFL. Not only the fans of the NFL, but people in general that kind of look at sports as a relation to modern society. It's like, do we want a guy that wears the jewelry to every game, that flashes the watch, that calls himself legendary, that has Lil Wayne at a college game day against Colorado State in week 2 between two teams that aren't supposed to be in the top 25? Is this something where Deion Sanders is dictating where he wants his son to go? Is this something where, there's a big parallel between him and Cam Ward that I don't even know if I want to touch on, but I mean, if we do, there is something that I find interesting about that. However, backtrack from that for a moment. It's, do we want the media circus that comes with Shador, the constant questions, the bombardment from fans, the rallying? I don't know if you've noticed this, Jimmy, but everybody says that online is not real. I don't know about you, but when it comes to sporting events, wrestling events, all of these things, people catch on to online stuff much quicker than others, for good, but most noticeably for bad. I think the real question was, is do we want Shador to come in and completely rock the quarterback in place, to completely rock the coaching staff in place, the GM? Will we all be uprooted because of the tsunami of media that comes with Shador Sanders? And I think in this draft, no matter how talented he was, the NFL GMs told us no, from all walks of life, from all classes. Mike Tomlin told him no. Tom Brady told him no. People that were reportedly or close to Jerry Jones told him no, for a team that could have easily developed a young backup quarterback and potential Dak Prescott replacement. So, with all that said, as big of a story as it was, Shador going to the 5th round is not uncommon in terms of quarterbacks of his size, athleticism, but talent at the quarterback position specifically. I don't think he dropped because of character issues. However, I do think that his overall placement of attitude and the things that came with it, along with his size, lack of athleticism, but noticeable talent, is what got him still drafted, but just so happens in the 5th round. Like, this isn't a Bronny James situations, obviously, but that's pretty much the bird's eye view of everything that happened this past weekend. Jimmy, do you have any thoughts? Do you want to stray away from it? Like, where are you at with it?
I feel like I think there's different layers to why he dropped. I think one part of it too is when you're drafting a guy like Shador, and I've heard some people say this clearly, the NFL and the scouts viewed him as a backup in the league. That's part of why he fell. And then you have to look into the backup quarterback's role is a lot more than just standing there on the sideline to be the backup, holding the clipboard, as they say. You're basically the starting quarterback's wingman in the meeting rooms, in the film breakdown, that whole process. And is Shador willing to buy in to being a backup? And it seems like that answer is a no. And I think that's why he slid so far. His teams were looking like, okay, we don't see him as a starter right away talent. So what would the dichotomy be of the quarterback room if he's in there, but he doesn't have the mindset of like, I'm going to help this guy prepare so we can have the best effort as a team this week, as a quarterback room this week. And to me, that's a part that I haven't really heard discussed a lot. But and the only people that know that are the coaches and the scouts. But to me, the way he fell as he did all these teams, as you just mentioned, who passed on him, who clearly could have taken him. To me, he just, at least from a 90,000-foot view, he doesn't seem like he has that mindset of, I will do whatever this team needs to win. If I need to go be on scout team, if I need to do this, if I'm inactive for the first 7 weeks, but I'm just here for the team. He doesn't come across in that way. He comes across as, I'm going to be legendary. And it's like, yeah, but we need you to just, your third string this week. You could be the whole legendary thing. That's, to me, the biggest thing is he going to buy in to being that role?
And I think that that is the thing that people point to the most, is the oh, you, I want to be legendary, and the type of media that came around that, and kind of the way that he put himself in that position, especially with the arrogance that the entire Sanders family showed throughout their time at Colorado specifically, and then Shador through this process. I I will say this. I only half agree with you in the sense of, I think that when you said that the league proved that they thought he was a backup quarterback. I wonder if he was a different guy, or if he approached this process, if he approached his last 2 years differently, if a team would have thought he was a first round guy, or even if it's not first round, will you go in the third round like Jalen Milroe did?
Yeah.
And become a project quarterback or a quarterback that we develop, because I do think that the circus around him, and I think that what he brought upon himself, like, people don't want to draft a brand, they want to draft a football player. And Shador
Yeah,
Sanders
because
had,
we are the brand as the team that you're going to. We're the brand.
right,
We'll go on the next day whether you're here or not being legendary. So we are the Browns. The
you
Cleveland Browns
hated
will
that
survive
legendary,
whether
yeah.
you're here or not.
Well,
Yeah, it's just like the
he brought it upon himself. Like, but here's the thing. I think that the
yeah.
the contrast to that, though, is what Shador Sanders does in his place. And I'm asking you honestly, is that any different than what Baker
Mhm.
Mayfield did coming out?
I feel like the noise around Shador was louder than Baker Mayfield. Like I don't remember Baker having this big entourage of and just like the media push of him talking about his own brand and Baker's doing this. I could be wrong. Maybe I just don't remember that far back, but I don't remember him being that kind of like in your face about who he is.
Well, maybe, but Johnny Manziel too is an example of a guy that
Oh
had,
yeah.
yeah, that, but he went first round, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I mean, and it was by the Browns, ironically. So it's not like that owner doesn't have a history of taking chances
Yeah.
high on quarterbacks with that type of. Now, obviously, I think Johnny Manziel was a better quarterback process. I'll say this: I think Johnny Manziel was a better athlete at the position
Oh
than
yeah.
Shador. I don't know if he was as talented. Like, I'll just say this: I truly and honestly believe that Shador should have gone higher, but I don't think that passing on him because of all of the stuff off the field, people want to act like that there was a bias against him for it. I think it's completely justified. If a team doesn't want that in their, if a team did, good for them. Like, I don't think anybody would be slamming a team if they would have taken Shador in this draft. Like, if the Giants took, I'll say this: the noise for if he would have went high is so much. I believe it was so much quieter than the noise if he would have dropped the way he did. It amplified it
Yeah.
even more because then there's dissension in the sense. So I don't want to stick on Shador too long. I gave my 2 cents. I had him as my number 2 quarterback in the end. I know on the show I picked Will Howard, but I went on Jimmy's radio show and took it back. I scaled it back. I put Howard back at 5, Milrow or Dart 4, Milrow 3, Shador 2, Cam Ward 1. So that's the way I kind of ended up seeing it. But overall, I think that you hit on a point. Is there any last words you want to say on the Shador thing? Because to me, I just think it's simple. Is that if he was good enough, he would have went high. I don't think it's some conspiracy. I don't think it's anything like that. I don't think that. I think that there is enough that it's probably good for Shador that he went through something to where he's not so bulletproof. And I hope that Dion takes a step back and helps his son be humble at this process. I hope it's not a year later, Shador's a starter, has a good game, and they're back in the cameras and doing all that. Because I think that this was a moment for Dion as much as Shador of like, oh, I think when he was on the phone, like, I almost effed up my kid's chances. Like, I think that I did
Yeah.
something wrong. And I think that he would be bold enough or brave enough to admit that. I wonder if we see a change from Dion going forward in that, hey, maybe this isn't the best thing for my son, for my players, for my team. That's what I hope comes out of it. I still like it. Like, here's the thing, Jimmy, is we still look back at Miami. People hated Miami. People hated the Hurricanes. But you and I, as kids, what did we love?
The you.
We loved the U. And I mean, I think even
Yeah.
you did when you were younger. They were cool. And I think that some
Yeah.
kids find Colorado cool, and maybe we're just too old for it. But, it's neither here nor there. Do you have any last opinions on that before we move on to the Browns draft? Because I have some opinions about that.
Yeah. Just two things. One, the aura that Shador had off the field doesn't match his talent on the field. And I think that's what got him into the issue. Dion could get away with it back in the day because he was the freakiest of freaks. He played two sports. He played in the major leagues and he played in the NFL. Like
Both sides
he
of the
was
ball,
able to do
too.
that when
Yeah.
you yeah, when you have that kind of talent, you don't have to do it, but if you do, you can get away with being prime. And Shador tried to follow that same thing, and he's talented, but he's just not at that level. So I have that, and hopefully this can be the humble pie that in every athlete at some point in their life gets this, where they get hit with that hit in the face, whether you get cut by whatever or you get benched. Maybe this can be a pivot point for his career where he can look back and go, yeah, that was when I needed that. I needed to kind of get slapped in the face a little bit and kind of reevaluate things. So we'll see moving forward. Hopefully that he can use this as a positive.
Yeah, honestly, I can't tell in the long run if it was good or bad, all this stuff, because I don't know if Shador Sanders' name was Tim Jones, if that he would have been, if anybody would have gotten the eyes on him that we did. Like, I don't think if his name was Tim Jones and he played at Arizona State, I would have gone, is this the number two quarterback in the draft? Is this the number two? I don't think I would have. I think I would have been like a small, pretty decent passer, maybe like sixth, seventh round. You know, who knows? Maybe my
Yeah.
bias played into my own scouting. I don't think I'm above that. And I think it definitely played into Mel Kiper's when he made his draft board. So I think that it's all like that. It's so funny that you say that about Dion and Shador, because there was a guy on their team that could have been prime time and acted like it and paraded like that
Yeah.
and had deserved it. Like in Travis, we would have hated him for it, but it would have been like, well, if
Yeah.
there's anybody, it's this guy. Like he is that good. So let's start off talking about the Browns before I even get to what I did like and didn't like about their draft, because the more I thought about it, the less I liked it. But what did you think at the top of the trade for of out of getting out of the Travis Hunter business and getting into two first round picks in 2026 business?
I I understand why they did it. And if they're trusting their process, and as everyone said, like I feel like the buzzword over the last week has been trust your board. But everyone, like, they trusted their board, and they must have had Graham pretty close to Abdul Carter to be able to make that move and feel comfortable with it. I mean, getting another first round pick next year is big because they're not just one player away. And I understand, like, the initially, I also did not like their draft, or I didn't like it initially, but the more I thought about it, I'm leaning towards liking it because if you throw enough darts at a dartboard for quarterbacks, one of them's bound to hit, and you're not wasting it, or not wasting it, but you're not spending that high capital with a first round pick where they're owed more money. There's more pressure to start them. You got a third and a fifth round pick that you drafted. Now I don't understand the Kenny Pickett trade. That's
Yeah,
kind of
another fifth round
weird.
pick
Like,
that they traded. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like so they kind of lost something there because now one of those four is gone. You're not going to keep Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and then the two rookies you pick. So you have to think both the rookies are safe, barring some kind of bizarre thing that happens, whether it be with Shador or Dylan Gabriel. But they're both probably going to make the team. So Kenny Pickett's the odd man out. So I like that theory of let's just try, and well, at some point probably they'll both play this year. But I like their draft the more that I look into it. Don't love it, but I understand their thought process and what they're doing.
Well, I'll hit it from the top. The trades that they made, I would say, netted them a pretty good chunk. And I'm going to be looking down at my screen more than I ever have, Jimmy, during our shows, is because there were so many trades and so many, just so many moves that I have to actually get a trade tracker up. That was the one thing I didn't pull up, but and I'm going to stall for time for just a second because I like the trade in general. Like, obviously, I think that the trade in terms of assets for assets is a good idea in what they did. It's what they gave up in terms of Travis Hunter, because you still have a first round pick. You still have and I'll get to my number one gripe in just a moment. I want to actually get the full amount of assets on the board, and for some reason I'm struggling mightily. Jimmy, can you take over for just a second, please?
Yeah, so we had the trade at the top of the draft, and my thing that I go back to is if they, and we'll never find out, but if you were to look at this as a one for one trade, where they could have had Travis Hunter, then I don't really like the trade as much. I would love for the Browns GMs to come out and say, if we hadn't got a package for this, here's where we would have stayed and here's who we would have picked. Um, But
Yeah, the
it's
Abdul Carter
with
point you
them.
said makes a lot of sense. Like you picked a defensive lineman, so you must have really had
Yeah.
Graham close to Carter for you to be able to
Hmm.
move down and take him at that point. So here's the draft capital that went back. Cleveland received the number 5 pick and a second round pick, number 36, which is essentially a first round pick in
Yeah.
all bets there. A fourth round pick at 126, and then they traded a and got a first from the Jacksonville Jaguars next year. The Jaguars ended up moving up from 126 to 104 with that trade and got back a sixth round pick at 200. So there's a couple ways you can look at this. I kind of look at this like they moved up from 2 to 5. To do that, it cost them dropping from 36 to 126. It cost them dropping from, or excuse me, 36 to 104 and dropping from 126 to 200 and a first round pick next year. So you dropped, gosh, off the top of my head, you dropped about 70 spots in the second round to the early fourth round, and then you dropped about 74 spots from the fourth to the sixth, and then you gave up a first next year. That's a big price, like to say the least.
Yeah.
And for the Browns, you're able to get a second at the top of the draft, and you got the first round pick next year. Perfect. Okay, what did you do with those? At least the Mason Graham pick. You're picking a guy I had in my top 5. This isn't like when they traded down from Phil Taylor. This isn't like when they traded down from Carson Wentz and got Corey Coleman. But look at the pattern, Jimmy. It's always the Browns that trade out from a generational player or at least like a guy that's in Travis Hunter
Yeah.
or Abdul Carter. You traded out of two guys that most people think are going to be potential future Hall of Famers. And you got out of
Yeah.
that business for the third time in 15 years, if not the fourth. I'm sure I could think of a fourth time. Okay. You picked Mason Graham, who's like a really good prospect, but there's a reason he wasn't at the top of the board. Like he's just a little off there. And so that's what you decided to do to get a first round pick next year. Okay. Now, what did you do with the rest of the capital in your draft here? Okay. You drafted a linebacker that was a former walk on, only has 1 year of starting experience at UCLA. Now, everybody loves this story, say he's the hardest worker. Like there's a reason he was a starter.
Yeah.
That's a great story, but you're still a 1 year starter. And you're, as a former walk on, whatever, Baker Mayfield's a former walk on, all this, but you're taking a chance on someone that only, and we're talking about a 1 year starter, a guy that started from the third game this season on. So he has less than a full year as a starter, as a linebacker at the collegiate level. Now you're going to make him a starting linebacker at the NFL level. So that means in between, he'll have less than a full year of starting experience on his first start in the NFL if he starts week 1
Yeah.
at major football, either UCLA or Cleveland. That's scary. Okay. Your
Hmm.
next pick is Quinshawn Judkins, who you took over Travion Henderson. I won't let my board get in the way of the pick itself, but you picked a running back who's kind of a workhorse. Like that's a good thing. He's got the size, speed, all of that. But you also don't have like this was my biggest gripe with it, Jimmy. I think if you were drafting to build for the future, this is a fine trade. Like you said, you're so far away. You're so far away from competing. I would have liked this draft if they hadn't signed Myles Garrett to a $40 million extension or $40 million per year extension. I would have
Yeah.
liked this draft if they aren't signaling we want to win now ish. It's like, okay, then why keep Garrett? Like, why? Why keep Garrett? Why bring in Flacco? I guess to have a veteran in the locker room with whoever's young. So I do like that. But I guess the rest of their team, it's like, okay, then trade Ward. Like, trade Garrett. Like, just strip it down. Then I would like it more because you're saying, hey, we're going to just build a great football team for 3 years from now. And nobody would bat an eye. You struck out with Deshaun Watson. It was a terrible deal. Okay. But now you've picked a running back that's going to get a ton of mileage before you're good, like in a guy like Judkins. Okay. Then
Yeah.
go on to the third round. I'll have to pull up the rest of that. Dylan Gabriel in the third round. Like, okay, I get it. He's a backup. You need to pick backups. Like, that's good. That's way earlier than most people thought he would go. And he doesn't have legit starter upside. So you burnt about the highest point of draft capital you could on a guy that's a pure backup in the NFL. Like the Harold Fannin pick, fine, whatever. Like it's a fine value at tight end for the top of the third round. Dylan Sampson, I like as a project. Shador Sanders, I like as a project. Like 20 years old, Dylan Sampson is the youngest player in this draft this year. I think it's also funny, Jimmy, to notice like all of these picks except for Fannin were up the middle. It was defensive tackle,
Mm-hmm.
middle linebacker, running back, quarterback. All are up the middle of your football team. I think that's fascinating. So overall, for me, Jimmy, I just didn't like the process of whatever they're doing. I would have gotten the trade down if you were trying to compete for the future. I would have gotten that. I would have liked their picks if they were more contending now. And so I'm just really torn. Like, where are we going now that this is our draft? What's the goal? So that's where I had a big problem with it. You seem to be a little more bullish on the Browns draft. What did you think of Cleveland?
Yeah, I think they are still planning for the future. To me, and my the only reason they re-signed Miles Garrett was so the fans didn't completely revolt because he was the only guy on their team that anyone cares about. Really, Nick Chubb's gone. You've got Denzel Ward, but he's not the fan favorite like Miles Garrett. I mean, he's the athletic freak of the league, and you could say he's on our team. To me, that's what it was. Is they were like, we just can't let this guy go. But I do think they are still building for the future, which that doesn't make sense to sign him, but then still be building for the future with no goals on winning. Obviously, it's their goal, but realistically, I don't see them as being the Texans of a couple years ago, the Bengals when they made that Super Bowl run. Like they don't have that.
No, because they don't have a
So it's
quarterback.
but as far as building depth, yeah, building depth for the future. I like getting the two running backs. Maybe they're hoping it's the Nick Chubb Kareem Hunt combo. But and the quarterback thing because the Browns have been so terrible at having drafting quarterbacks, finding quarterbacks. If you just take a couple late round shots, because we've seen plenty of guys be productive that are later round picks. You don't have to spend the number one overall pick on your franchise quarterback. They've gone that route. You've seen the jersey. How many was there? 17 names on it of
More,
top
yeah.
10 picks. Yeah, so it's like I get what they're doing, throw the darts, and are they going to be able to do like what the Niners did with Trey Lance and admit after a couple years, yeah, we messed up on this one. We're just gonna move on. We're not going to force him in to be a starter. So I'll see what they do moving forward, but I like the idea. And again, it all comes down to what do you do with the picks that you're acquiring? They're great at acquiring picks, but they never hit on them. And
That's
so that's the ultimate thing
but
with this. Like the
the
like the Eagles have been great with hitting on picks.
mhm. But the yeah,
Go
but the
ahead.
no, I'm with you. But the reason they don't hit on picks is because they have sure things and say we're good.
Yes.
Julio Jones, we're good. Carson
Yeah.
Wentz, who was an NFL MVP candidate and was leading the Eagles to a Super Bowl till he got hurt. We're good. Okay. Travis Hunter,
Yeah.
Abdul Carter, we're good. Thanks. Why are you bad? I wonder
And
why. So,
and that's why we said before, like the number 2 and 3 picks in this year's draft, it's just it's simple. It's right. Don't get cute. And maybe this will pay off, but you had two guys right there. It didn't matter who you picked, just pick one of them. Like,
and you picked like to me a guy that's like tier 2.5 in this draft. Like
mm-hmm.
I think it was Ward Hunter Carter. I think Genty was in himself a tier 2, and then Graham's like a 2.5. But honestly, and I don't care about like the strategy outside because on your point, Jimmy, before we move on, is that what like okay, you if you traded Garrett, like so what? Like he asked out, you could paint that away. You would have gotten more draft capital or at least someone young, something to help. I would have guessed draft capital. You could have loaded up even more, maybe pushed it to next year, whatever, rebuild. But like, yeah, they need to someone sell someone's jerseys. Guess what? You just backed yourself into a corner and your third string, fourth, a guy that may just get cut in training camp, to be honest. That's what I think will happen, is going to be your number one jersey seller. And so they're all going to come in week one. It's not going to be Garrett jerseys. It's not going to be Judkins jerseys. You didn't even get a guy
Yeah.
that could sell to the fans. Like even just a, or even like, I got to be honest, like with you, Jimmy, if you were going to take Shador anyways, take it seriously, like and pick them higher just so there's like this foundation, but that's obviously not the case. So this is just a dog and pony show in the first place. It's like Jimmy Haslam decided to move on from Deshaun Watson and it just became a dog and pony show all over again. Like, and it's just I don't know, Jimmy. I don't know if dropping as far as he could, maybe the Browns were the plan all along, but they wanted to humble Shador. I don't know. The more I talk about it, the less I like it. I thought I actually liked their draft, but the more I talk about it, I don't. I don't.
Yeah.
Well,
And the Jag side of it too is interesting with them getting Travis Hunter. They have the new GM, new head coach. Everyone's excited to make a splash. So I like that from the Jags point of view. Now, again, giving up a first rounder next year, that's a big, big leap to take a Travis Hunter. But when you have that new GM, you have that new coach, you want to try to make a splash. And I feel like Travis Hunter's a safe splash. It's not like you took a risk
oh no, yeah, like
drafting Travis Hunter.
right. This guy is legit. Like
Yeah.
he is a real guy in the league. So, or at least we think he will be. I mean, but he's a real enough prospect at least.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, looking at their draft, it really was kind of Travis Hunter and a lot like guys that like you'd like Ransall, Milam, like Tootin, who ran the fastest 40 time of the running backs. But this draft is going to be purely defined by Travis Hunter, and that really tells me two things. Mainly is that getting Trevor Lawrence help is their number one like focus. And number
Yeah.
two is they think they're one player away. And I don't think it's one player away from a Super Bowl, but I do think they think they're one player away from the playoffs. And I do think that that's just
Yeah.
important to have. After next year, the first round pick stuff's over. And I think it's more likely that the Jaguars will be picking closer to 20 than they will to 1. Okay. Like, I do think that they're going to fight for a playoff spot. I do think that they're in a position to have a good year next year. And then, like, obviously, when you give up your second round pick, they had 2/3 in this draft. Like I said, they drafted a talented corner and they drafted the offensive lineman out of West Virginia to help shore the line. But do you know what made Gladstone, like why I think he's going to be a success in this league just based off of one draft, Jimmy? It goes in the shadows, and none of us saw it until I started breaking down trades of what happened during the draft this year. The Jacksonville Jaguars have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds next year, but we would have had no idea because we said, oh, they gave up a
Yeah.
first rounder. What a price. They actually, and I'll read out the full trade to you. They actually made a trade with the Lions where the Jaguars gave up the 70th overall pick. They gave up the 182nd pick and a 6th round pick next year. In return, they got pick 102. So they dropped from 70 to 102. And to do that and give up a 6, they got 2 third round picks next year for doing that trade. That's a steal of a
Yeah.
trade, in my opinion. Like, and that was the Tesla pick that the Lions made. So, I mean, I look at what they did, and I kind of am like, oh, so now you've got 4 top 100 picks next year. So you actually have plus capital in the top 100, though you gave up your first round pick and you came away with a potentially generational player. I don't love like all of the moves the Jags made, but I honestly, if you had me to give them a grade, I'd give them an A because they took
Mm-hmm.
the chance on a generation. They went from not having a sure thing to having a sure thing, or at least what we think is an absolute sure thing. You get a guy that helps Trevor Lawrence, which is exactly what I told you, Jimmy, is this should be an enhancement builder draft. And you got 3 thirds next year and 1 second round pick next year. So you replenished in terms of quantity over the quality of the first round pick you gave up again to get a generational talent. So I actually really like the Jags the more I looked at their side. What do you think about that now that you know about the extra thirds and all that? What do you think about the Jags draft?
I like it even more because, like you said, the more draft capital you have, that's big. They may not have a first round pick next year, but this tells you, I think, too, their mindset going into the season. They're not thinking, well, no team is, but realistically, they're like, hey, if we play to our potential and we add Travis Hunter, we're going to be picking in the 20s. So we're giving up this mid 20s pick. That's not that valuable. And we have now 3 picks in the third round that we could use. We have a second round pick we can use. So if they wanted to get back into the first, they have enough if they wanted to trade into the first round next year,
Yes.
if they wanted to do that.
Yes.
So again, if you have a GM that's creative and smart and is willing to make risks or take risks and try to make trades on draft day, then they did exactly what you need to do. Compile more picks for the next year, and who knows what that third round pick will be a piece for going up to next year's draft. So I think it's even better. I love when teams do that. It's the chess while some of the league is playing checkers.
Yeah, and that's the chess too, is you get a bunch of guys in the second, third round, especially when you only have so many max contracts you're going to give out. They have theirs covered.
Yeah,
Like we're going to pay Trevor, we're going to pay BTJ, we're going to pay Hunter, we're going to pay Josh Allen, and then if a fifth guy emerges, but that's it. Like you only have so many guys, so
yeah.
why always try to swing? Get a bunch of guys that'll help enhance those guys later. So let's move on to the fun part of the show today. And just so everyone knows, we will not be taking this long for each team. This now we are going to get. We're going to try to hit every team that we can, but we're going to do our best. So we have our 2025 NFL Draft Superlative Awards Show. Woo! Woo! And up we have 13 categories today, ranging from our least favorite first round pick, our favorite day three picks, who's going to be the top impact day one starter, and our whoa moment of the night. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with our least favorite drafts and our favorite drafts of the night. So we are going to kick off with your 2025 NFL Draft Superlative Award Show with our best or favorite first round pick or the best first round pick. It's kind of whatever we want to classify it as. It's a dealer's choice on that. Jimmy, would you like me or would you like to go first?
I'll let you take the floor first.
Okay, and since we're trying to hit all 32 teams, we're going to give ourselves 2 minutes to do our award acceptance speech, essentially. And then we're off the clock and we move on to the next team. So we're going to try to hit your team as much as we can. My favorite first round pick or the best first round pick, and I'll put a caveat. Jimmy does not have these caveats. I try to challenge myself and take the easy ones out. So I would only made myself allowed to pick a second half of the first round guy. So a guy picked from 17 to 32 was who I had to pick on my favorite first round pick. So I take out the easy ones like Cam Ward or Ashton Genty, like guys like that. So my favorite first round pick goes to the three-time Super Bowl champion, four-time Super Bowl champion now, but runner-up this year, Kansas City Chiefs. I thought Josh Simmons was my favorite first-round pick of the evening because of two factors. I think Josh Simmons easily had a chance to be one of the top offensive tackles in this class if he was healthy. He was not healthy, had a torn patellar muscle, but in terms of tackles in this class, he showed the best combination of athleticism and tape ready film to come in and be a starting left tackle in the NFL and one that'll last. So to get him, but also get him by getting a fifth round pick from the team that just beat you in the Super Bowl so you could move up or move down one spot and still get your guy. I thought that was a masterclass of not only getting what I thought was a great value in the first round and got a desperate need in left tackle. You were also able to get a fifth round pick out of it. I would have loved the pick if it was just him, but you were able to get a fifth. The rest of their draft, they do what they usually do. They focused on defense, and then the one skill player they got went a round and a half later than he should have, and Jalen Royals. I think he's going to be a breakout fantasy player this year in the mold of Rashee Rice. I really love the Josh Simmons pick, and the Royals pick is my sleeper one. But, yep, for my first round, my favorite pick of the first round, Josh Simmons of the Kansas City Chiefs.
I like that pick. I like it. For my favorite pick of the first round, I'm going to go with the Seattle Seahawks and Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. Part of my thing for this was just personally, I like the guy. When they asked him what he's going to do next at his draft party, he said, "Get in all these Bush Lights we got." Great plug for himself to try to get a Bush Light deal playing
Heck
with the
yeah.
Seahawks. I mean, the writing's on the wall. It's right there. Got a great mustache, gritty kid from North Dakota State. But I like the pick for the Seahawks. And just overall, their draft, I like what they did with the first three picks. Nick Emanwari in the second round, he was one that could have potentially gone in the first. Gray Zabel looks like he can shore up the line. He's got some versatility. I love Elijah Arroyo that they got with their third pick. I wanted my Niners to get him. I love him as a tight end prospect. I think he can be great for Sam Darnold. We've seen Sam Darnold. We saw what he did last year with Hawkinson with the Vikings, where if he's got a playmaker in the middle of the field, he's going to use him. And then I wasn't sure how I'd feel about Jalen Milroe, but I really like him.
Oh
I
my
like
goodness.
the potential.
Upset of the century.
I like the potential for him going there. Sam Darnold is the starter. I don't think there's any question about that. But I am curious how creative they can be with Jalen Milroe, and I'm fascinated to see what he can do. And I think Sam Darnold spending a year with Kevin O'Connell and just being a sponge and soaking all that in. Now Jalen Milroe gets to be in a meeting room with Sam Darnold every single week to develop as a passer, as a true pro, as a quarterback, which I feel like Sam Darnold show. He was with the Niners and Kyle Shanahan for a year. He's with KOC for a year. He's been through the trials and tribulations. So I love that landing spot for Jalen Milroe. So overall, though, Gray Zabel, he's my guy in the first round.
That was my fate. Honestly, that was in competition with. And by the way, I didn't say this at the beginning. Jimmy and I actually drafted teams, so we know who has what team, but we don't know for what superlative and what player it could be. So we did that so we could spread it evenly. I was going to pick the Seahawks, and they were in contention for my favorite draft. They turned DK Metcalf and Geno Smith, who I think was kind of on the way out. You pretty much do a 1-for-1 replacement with Jalen Milroe and Geno Smith with that pick. Then you take the second and the second, or your own third round pick, and the second round pick you got from the DK Metcalf trade. You go up and you get Nick Emanwari, and then you stay and get Elijah Arroyo. My honestly, one of my favorite day 3 picks was Torrey Horton out of Colorado State. I think he can come in and be a number 3 receiver for your first day. Jimmy, this feels like a draft from 2010, 2011 when the Seahawks built their dynasty. And the sneaky thing is too, I didn't know this. The Seahawks have an out of Sam Darnold's contract after year 1. So this very well
Yeah.
could be Jalen Milroe's team in 2026. So I loved their draft, and especially a guy like Mike McDaniel going back to his roots, getting a running quarterback like he had in Lamar, getting a big safety like all these great defenses have, like Cam Chancellor back in the day. Loved their draft, Jimmy. Loved it. Now on to a less popular category, our worst pick of the first round, or at least our least favorite, like in that sense.
Yeah.
I'll kick off the negativity. I picked Kenneth Grant for the Miami Dolphins, but it's not as much about Kenneth Grant as it is the Dolphins. I titled this Plugging a 330-pound hole on a sinking ship. The more and more I looked at the Dolphins draft, I don't actually dislike it from a pure picks standpoint in terms of if this was another team, would I have not liked this draft? And the answer is no, I would have liked it. You get Kenneth Grant, you had an immediate need at a nose tackle for your new defense. So you get a guy that comes in that's one of the best nose tackle prospects we've had in a couple of years. You get Jonah, I can't say his last name, from Arizona. He was a guy that I saw with, scouting Jordan Morgan. He's a guy that's had experience all over the offensive line, including left tackle, right tackle, and guard. And with this makeshift offensive line, you always need someone that's versatile. You take Jason Marshall in the 5th round, who was a former 5-star guy. You get Ollie Gordon and Quinn Ewers in the 6th and 7th round. Guys that were tremendous 2023 prospects, but in 2024 had down years. The problem, Jimmy, is that they announced that they were going to trade Jalen Ramsey. Teron Armstead retired. Tyreek Hill is doing his own side quest out in Miami. Tua is always hurt. I think that this team has too many holes to plug. And no matter what they did, I'm not sure if there was something I truly could have loved. But when you had your pick of the litter at cornerback, when you're about to get rid of your star cornerback, I just don't understand how you can go away from just. I think they have too many needs. I think they should essentially tear it down, or this is the number 1 team. I would have ranked Dallas of teams that didn't pick Shador Sanders. I would have had Dallas at 3, Pittsburgh at 2, and the Miami Dolphins at 1, even over Pittsburgh, because the Miami Dolphins, Shador Sanders would have played the Tua role perfectly. You're talking about an offense with Mike McDaniel that is probably the most physically independent quarterback position in the league. Like, you don't have to have a super strong arm. You don't have to have legs to run. You just got to precisely execute his offense, which is why Tua's so good for it. Shador Sanders was the quarterback in this draft to run that type of offense. And he was a guy that if he gets hurt, like, I love Zach Wilson as a prospect, sure. But if Zach Wilson hits, you're going to have to pay him. And Tua has another year on his deal before you can truly get out of it. So you're kind of backed into a corner. Shador Sanders would have at least been cost controlled. He would have fit. He would have filled a need.
Yeah.
I don't hate Kenneth Grant, but when that's your first round pick, I only felt it could be downhill from there. I do not. Yeah, I would say that the Dolphins draft was one of my least favorites, but it's more the position Dolphins, and I loved him 2 years ago. Not anymore.
For my least favorite pick of the first round, I'm going to go with Cincinnati Bengals and Shamar Stewart. That is, it has the potential to hit, but I just, with what the Bengals, with their defense obviously was their weak point last year. Just with Shamar Stewart, I'm not personally a fan of the guys where you didn't see the production on the field, but then they go to the combine, test incredibly well, and they shoot up the draft board. I personally don't like that. I would rather trust the film and trust the college production over someone at the combine. Like to me, if I see it all on the field and then they test, okay, I'm more likely to go, we're going to trust the game speed and what the guy can do as a football player. And Shamar Stewart, you saw flashes and he had a lot of pressures, but then finishing the play. And if you're not able to finish plays in college, you know how much faster the NFL is. Everybody always talks about that, how much quicker the quarterbacks are, how much better the tackles are. So I just wasn't a big fan of getting that. I get the need and addressing the need with him, but they were kind of in that middle ground of the first round where they're kind of stuck there in no man's land. But I just wasn't a big fan of that pick for the Bengals. I don't know. I want them to be good because I love Joe Burrow and I love that offense. But for that pick, it's like I would have felt better taking more of a safer, like solid defensive lineman as opposed to the guy who's that boomer bust who 2 years from now may not even be on the roster if he's not able to make plays. They got to get rid. Whatever happened.
Yeah, and this is not a linear thing. I hear all the time, like, "Oh, but Trayvon Walker went first overall. How is this? How is this that much different?" Well, Trayvon Walker was a first round football player, regardless. He was just
Mm-hmm.
a second half of the first round football player, like Stewart got drafted in. He got pushed up because his athleticism was so unbelievable that you were like, well, if he's a first round pick, anyways, what if, right? Shamar
Yeah.
Stewart's a seventh round tape guy, but you got motor and effort. So you're like, okay, I like that. And then when he tests really well, you're like, oh, like, okay, what if we got a really high motor potential run stuffing defensive end with these traits? It's just that Stewart's traits were so unbelievably good. And he was a 5-star prospect that he didn't go one, he didn't go two, he wouldn't have gone one in 2022 like when Trayvon Walker
Mm-hmm.
did. That was a different experience. I'm with you with Shamar Stewart. They picked an old but reliable linebacker in the second round. They picked a guard out of Georgia who some people think is more boomer bust than you'd think. I still think it's a good idea to pick Georgia guards when you need a starting guard in the NFL. And then the rest of their draft I thought was fairly ho hum. But yeah, the Bengals yet again with a draft that, hopefully pays off in the short term, but I don't know. Like I'm with you. So I wasn't, you know my feelings about Shamar Stewart as well. I had him
Yeah.
30th in our mock draft, and I was the one to take him off the board. So our favorite day two pick. My player is more indicative of a team I wanted to highlight. Pretty much I cheated on Jimmy and just picked my favorite drafts. I just used players to magnify it. My favorite day
Yeah.
two pick, and again, a qualifier I did for mine. I only wanted to choose a round three guy. Like I didn't want to choose a round two guy. I specifically, since we're doing day two, I went round three. I picked Landon Jackson of Arkansas for the Buffalo Bills. And the reason why is when referring to that good synergy by you, by the way, Jimmy, you didn't even know it. I picked Shamar Stewart to the Buffalo Bills at 30th overall in our mock draft because they have a type that they like. They like to take defensive linemen that have tons of traits that are underdeveloped, and they like to develop them, whether they hit or they don't. It goes back to AJ Epinesa, it goes to Gregory Rousseau, and then it went to Landon Jackson. I like that they know who they are and know what to target. But even more, I love what they did with their first four picks. They decided that they were going to hammer home that we didn't have a good defense last year. We are going to absolutely load up. I wasn't the biggest Max Harrison guy in terms of one-on-one man-to-man corner tape, But the fact that they play such a zone heavy scheme, which is what Hairston came out of at Kentucky, makes him fit in a lot easier than he would have if he went to a team that played him like a fish out of water. No, he's going to be comfortably in the ocean and playing just fine in that type of scheme. They trade up to take TJ Sanders along the defensive line. I don't have any TJ Sanders opinions, but picking a guy that was consensusly in the top 50 is good with me in that round. You take Landon Jackson at defensive end to develop as a high athletic pass rusher. And then at the top of the fourth, you take Deion Walker, who comes in and is your project. He can play nose tackle for sure, but he's got the athleticism at 6'7", 330 pounds to play three tech as well if he ever gets in good enough shape. But he is a high floor player with a high ceiling player with like a medium floor. I don't think it's a low floor, but it's a medium floor. There's some risk in it, but fourth round, you're taking a potential first round pick player. So I loved what the Bills did, but I love they stuck to their roots in the third round. And to complement the rest of their defensive draft, they stuck to character and took a defensive end with high athletic traits.
For my favorite day two pick, I'm starting to see when I was going through this, I think I have a type for my offensive lineman that I like. Gray Zabel, big kid, mustache, and a mullet. My favorite day two pick is Tate Ratledge of the Lions. He's a Dan Campbell guy. And again, the more I was like, they're the same guys. These two, they look identical. They could pass as brothers. But with what the Lions have already and how they've built their team into what it is, they've done it all inside. They've got Penei Sewell. You're adding a guy like Tate Ratledge, who's he's a monster. 6'7", 308 playing guard.
Yeah.
I mean, this kid is big. And you've got the power run that they had. They've got Gibbs, Montgomery. They have all the skill guys. They're set everywhere else. I love that pick. Now, I'm not their first round pick, Tyleik Williams. That was an interesting one. That to me seemed like a little high for him. And then the rest of their draft, I wasn't sure about the rest of their draft. Like I felt kind of indifferent about it. But Detroit has shown over the last few years they're one of those teams. If you're indifferent about their draft, you just have to step back and go, well, I trust what they're doing because they've shown before. They've had some picks who, you weren't really sure about what are they going to do, and they just work. The Eagles are another team where whoever they pick, you just trust. They must see something in that guy. So I just feel like that's kind of the way I look at the rest of their draft. But that Tate Ratledge pick for a team that already is set to go on a Super Bowl run. Again, all of these things are just extra pieces. But to add an extra piece like that in the second round, I feel like that's big.
He was a great pick. That was a guy that was he was the round two or day two guard that everybody wanted to have. So I'm with you on that being the pick. Tyleik Williams, 334-pound pass rusher. Like I like the profile, but obviously there's some things that you could work on with him. And then they're for their first five picks in the first five rounds were on the line of scrimmage, whether it be guard, defensive end, defensive tackle. So they knew exactly what they wanted to do coming into the draft, and that was fortify the trenches. And I think that we rarely hate it when a team decides to do just that. So my least favorite day two pick, and this is where, again, I don't think either of us really like being negative but we had to pick someone. And for me, this may come out of left field, but mine, again, and by the way, Jimmy, again, a little limiter I put on myself. I made sure it was a second round guy. That was my least favorite. So my favorite had to be a third round guy. My least favorite had to be a second round guy to kind of make it challenging. I went with the Tennessee Titans pick of Olafamu Oladejo, and it's more indicative of what they did after Cam Ward. Oladejo is the guy. First, you traded down. You didn't have a third round pick. You picked at the top of the second round, and you traded down to acquire an extra third round pick. Like, okay, like that's fine. Now you've diversified. You're going to get more bodies into the building instead of like a high talent, even though you had Luther Burden available at the top of the board. You had some of these running backs. You had some of these wide receivers, Jaden Higgins, for an example, at the top of the board. So you had these guys, but you decided to say, no, we'll wait. Okay. Instead of helping our young quarterback, we're going to wait. They ended up selecting a edge rusher that started the year at UCLA. Again, UCLA just was all over the place. But I guess he left the linebacker position so the Browns linebacker from UCLA could take his spot, and then he went to edge rusher. He's still fairly new to football. And then in the third round, they picked Kevin Winston, who some people said would have been a first round pick if he was healthy last year, but he got hurt so bad apparently that he dropped out of the second round too and didn't go until pick 88, which is like a mid third round pick. And for a guy that was going to be a
Yeah.
first round pick for sure next year, it kind of makes me go like, how sure were we?
Yeah.
So you pick Cam Ward and you could have these picks, these valuable picks or whatever to build around him. You end up picking a project pass rusher and an injured safety with your two picks. Now they did pick Gunnar Helm. They did pick the receive Alamore out of Stanford. They did pick DK out of Florida, who's a 4.34 burner. So it's not like they didn't do anything to help Cam Ward. But I just thought the Titans got real loose with their day two picks, and especially with Oladejo in the second round. So it was just a draft I wasn't a big fan of after Cam Ward at one, and then in the third day I kind of liked.
Yeah. For my bad day two pick, I'm going to a team much like the Lions that I trust what they do in the draft most of the time. But Andrew Makuba, the second round pick of the Eagles, I didn't like it only because, like, yes, he's athletic, he's talented, he's shown it on tape, but he's 5'11, 185 pounds, trying to play safety in the NFL. This is a big man's game, and we're seeing so many big receivers, so many teams being more physical in the run game. And at that size, can he hold up in the NFL? That's my only question. I'm not questioning the talent. It's just to take a guy in the second round that's that slight of frame. And I mean, there was times last year where when he tries to come up and support in the run game, he can't do it against Arkansas. He just got washed across the field. It seemed like every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is just for the Eagles who typically draft so well. I was curious as their mindset on that. They already have a great secondary, but to add a guy that's that slight of frame at safety, it's one thing if he's at like Maxwell Harrison. He's on the outside and getting the burners. When you're a safety, you have to be, roving in the middle of the field. You're getting on the tight ends, or if you may have to come up and slide into the nickel position if you've got a tight end in front of you. Can he do that? Can he come up and help in the run game? So to me, that was a questionable one. I don't hate the pick because it's the Eagles. I just have to trust, like, okay, they must have a plan with this guy. Maybe they draft him as a safety, use him somewhere else.
Play him at like nickel or something like that.
Yeah, they can scheme their defense around him. And that's, again, where I go into the trust of the coaches and the GM in the front office of going, okay, we're drafting him here, but we have a plan for what we're going to do with him. But as far as day two picks that I was over analyzing, because with so many of these, I liked so many picks. Like almost every
I did
team
too.
in this draft, I liked what so it's hard. It feels
That's
like
rare.
we're nitpicking, but yeah, it seems like the last couple of years. I don't remember this. The last couple of years, you saw teams that were, we're giving them an F because we have to give them a grade. It was so bad. I didn't really see that with anybody this year. But
I didn't either.
Yeah, Makuba, it's just his size to me scares me. Being in the middle field at 185 pounds.
Yeah, and ESPN had him ranked as like the 96th player in the draft. So he was drafted around higher than most people thought. But like you said, Howie Roseman kind of knows what he's doing, gets Jahad Campbell in the first round, gets Ty Robinson, my guy I was telling you about, Jimmy, in the fourth round.
That was a tough one for me to not pick Ty Robinson for one of my superlatives. I used the Eagles for this one, but you heard me talking about Ty Robinson.
Almost.
It's like, the Eagles got a freaking another one.
Yep.
To put in the middle of that defense, and I love the Campbell pick too.
Well, speaking of day three picks, we only did our favorites. I think it's punching down to say a day three pick is your least favorite. Most people's would be Shador anyways, but I only went with favorites. I was gonna pick Torrey Horton of Seattle before you took the Seahawks, and then I realized that I couldn't have thanked you enough, Jimmy, because my favorite day three pick, the New England Patriots may have not gotten their future left tackle at fourth overall, but they did in the seventh round with Marcus Bryant, my guy out of Missouri, baby. I talked about him on our offensive line preview show, and I banged the table. He was a guy that if I was in a draft room and we were in the 6th or 7th round, I would bang the table like, get Marcus Bryant in here. He's good enough. He played great in the SEC. He is a mountain. When he locks his hands in, he can stalemate the rush. He even does good against like looping pass rushers because he has the size to kind of push him out of the pocket. It was really only on spin moves that his really tall and heavy frame got showed on tape as a negative. And he's an average run blocker, but he's so big that he's still like average. He's not bad at run blocking. He is a guy that I just love bringing in the building, especially because I think that you may have a situation with your fourth. Like, I'll just say this. I love the Marcus Bryant pick. I love that they, Patriots way got a place kicker. Braden Swinson, some people think was the LSU's best player last year. Josh Farmer was a steal out of Florida State. Jared Wilson, you picked an interior offensive lineman from Georgia that fell half a round too far. You picked Kyle Williams, who was Cam Ward's favorite target and ran blistering numbers at the combine. You picked Travion Henderson, who was in my top 15 of this draft in the second round as your future key offensive piece. And then you picked your franchise left guard at 4th overall. That was a little bit of a pot shot, Jimmy. That was just me kind of stoking the flames on that one. But you picked another offensive lineman to go with again, LSU offensive lineman, Georgia offensive lineman, Missouri offensive lineman. They knew to come to the SEC for linemen. I told you about how much I love Marcus Bryant. I think he could play both tackle positions in the NFL. I think he starts as a backup, but I think he's somewhere. Maybe he develops into an average starter someday or something, but he is a guy that I think can come into a pinch and truly hold down the left tackle spot better than you would think for a rookie tackle. So that was my favorite day 3 pick. Good draft by the New England Patriots. It really was. If the things work out with Campbell, he can always go to guard.
Yes. Of course, he can always get. Hey, and who doesn't want a franchise guard? Hey, Hall of Fame guard's just as good a Hall of Fame tackle. Okay,
exactly.
Either way, my favorite day 3 pick goes to the Dallas Cowboys and running back Jaden Blue out of Texas. I love this pick. They didn't get Genty. There was talk, would they trade up to get Ashton Genty? Could Ashton Genty somehow fall to them at 12? That was never going to happen. But Jaden Blue is the now 3rd running back in a row from Texas to get drafted. If he didn't get hurt, I think he was going higher than where he ended up falling to. But you had Bijan a couple years ago, and then you had Jonathan Brooks, who got hurt again for the Panthers last year.
Yeah.
That dude.
Bad luck.
Hate that for. But Jaden Blue going to the Cowboys. They did sign Javonte Williams from Denver, but I don't think he is not coming into so many teams now that use rotations at running back. Javonte Williams is not coming in and solidifying himself as the every down back. And I just feel like if Jaden Blue stayed in the state of Texas, he can be the next Cowboys running back. And just to get that kind of value late in the draft, and that's what we saw with the running back class. There's so many guys. Obviously, Genty was in a class of his own, but for Blue to go to the Cowboys and what they can do with that offense, Dowdle's no longer there. So again, they brought in Javonte. They still got Deuce Vaughn. Don't forget about Deuce. Little Deuce is still there. But Jaden Blue, I absolutely love that pick for where they were able to get him. And looking at the rest of it, I like what they did at the top. Tyler Booker, you could say it's reaching too high to get a guard there, but if he fits your scheme and he's your guy, it doesn't. You could take him at 12, or if they wanted to trade back to get him. But I like that. And Ezraku, for them to get him in the 2nd round. I like him as a pass rusher. Add more to the arsenal for Micah Parsons. Anything you can get to help him get the double teams away from him, or free up Ezraku to come off the edge. So all in all, I like that draft. But Jaden Blue going in the 5th round to the Cowboys to potentially be a guy that can get you 10 touchdowns this year.
Jadon Blue was someone I caught in the college football playoffs and held on to. I really liked him. I thought that the Cowboys had one of the best drafts in the NFL. Tyler Booker in the 1st round, I thought people underrated the value that he's going to bring. They thought it was too high. Well, they came around and put Donovan Ezraku and Siobhan Revel, guys that were both viewed as late 1st round picks in this draft in the 2nd and 3rd round. So I think they more than made up for the lack of value, quote unquote, that they got in Tyler Booker. Remember, they traded a 4th round pick for Jonathan Mingo. I count that as part of the draft class. Yes, he only has 2 years left on his rookie contract. Yes, he quote unquote busted in Carolina, but he's a huge fast receiver that gets a second chance and maybe was just in the wrong spot in that very dysfunctional Carolina Panthers room. I think that Mingo is worth a fourth round pick for a guy with his athleticism, rookie contract, and he was drafted in the second round 2 years ago. So you got that. You got Jadon Blue. You picked a Alabama. You picked, excuse me, an Oregon offensive lineman, and then Phil Maffa, who may become a fan favorite there. I also
He's
thought the Cowboys had a great draft.
Yeah, Phil Maffa 6'1", 235. That is a load at running back. Again, you're getting a guy like that in the seventh round. And that's you take those chances at the running backs late. How many guys have we seen these late round running backs that no one remembers the name? Now, Phil Maffa is what if you watch college football, he's been 2,800 yards, 21 touchdowns over the last two
Right.
years. So he's been productive. But he could be a guy in a couple of years where you're like, oh, I remember that. When was he drafted? Oh, he was almost undrafted. Oh, okay. So
And
I love what the Cowboys do.
he's a guy that has a little bit of lore too. I thought he was a guy that was like 6'4", like given like what
Yeah,
I
those camera
originally.
angles.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think it's TikTok's tricking me is what it is. Okay, we're out of the rounds. We're out of the day. We are just going now to true superlatives. We are going for our whoa moment of the night. My pick, the only moment in the first round that truly made me go whoa was Ashton Genty to the Raiders because I had heard enough information from various draft sources that they were going to go with either Mason Graham if he was there or either Kelvin Banks Jr. or Armand Membu. And I started truly believing that Kelvin Banks Jr. was going to be the pick with the Raiders. So once Genty was out there, and once Graham was off the board, I just figured that Kelvin Banks was going to be the pick. I was like, oh man, we're going to get another Raiders pick. So when it was Ashton Genty, they had fooled me well enough to thinking that Genty wasn't in discussion at 6 anymore, which is foolish looking back on it. All the preparation, try to make this a winning team now. Pete Carroll's there. Marshawn Lynch is like a team advisor. Not really, but kinda.
Yeah.
And Genty is just, I mean, he's the reincarnation of what Marshawn Lynch was as a talent, but truthfully, I mean, even more secure in my opinion as like that type of guy. So I thought that really made me say, whoa. And I think there were probably about 7 drafts that I thought could have been the draft of the best draft, or at least in the top 5. The Raiders would have made my top 5. I thought the Raiders really knocked it out. Jack Beck, a lot of people like him more than I do, but he's just a 6'1", 205, former tight end, slot receiver, tough as nails, great locker room. Even had that tragic death of his brother during the New Orleans
Yeah.
New Year's Day, truck attack that happened there. And so he has perseverance. He knows what he's playing for. Darian Porter, 6'3", ran a 4.3 flat at cornerback, former wide receiver, literally to a T, Jimmy, what Tariq Woolen was coming out of UTSA, except Porter played at Iowa State. Charles Grant, developmental left tackle type of guy. Deontay Thornton, 4.30 Well, if you wanted your next DK Metcalf, you got a little bit of a project, but he might be worth the squeeze. Then they got 2 DTs from the SEC and Hemingway and Pegasus. And then probably your favorite picks of the draft, they got 2 sixth round, just good old boys from the great North that played in the FCS, the winner of the year and the of the Walter Payton FCS award, and the runner up in Tommy Mellott, quarterback wide receiver from Montana State, and Cam Miller, quarterback from North Dakota State, who almost took down Shador Sanders. It's so funny. They passed on Shador Sanders, but the antithesis of them, where Shador beat this guy in that close game or
Yeah.
overtime game, they took that guy instead, really showing that the Raiders put a premium on 2 things, and that was character and athleticism. And I don't like picking for just character, but when you put the athleticism combined to it, you're building a hell of a football team. Great first draft for Pete Carroll and Tom Brady there in Las Vegas.
Love it. My whoa moment of day one, which it wasn't that event. I think again, going back to what we said in the very beginning, so many linemen that went, so many big guys that went. There weren't really that many woes, but to me, it's Shador not going number 21 to the Steelers and them taking Derek Harmon. That was the next tipping point
Yeah.
of the night where you go, uh-oh. Because there was talks of the Giants trading back in, but at that point, everyone knew if they trade back in, it's not going to be for Shador. It's going to be for Jackson Dart. So when Pittsburgh didn't take him and they went Derek Harmon, which was a great pick. And unfortunately, if you were watching the ESPN show, it didn't get talked about really at all because someone had a pity party that his guy didn't get taken. But
Yeah.
and then you hear the Derek Harmon story of him and his mom the night of the draft. So sad what he had to go through that night on the happiest day of his life. His mom's in the ICU, all of that. But just that moment when they didn't take Shador, that was when it all started to unravel. And then you go, okay, now, and then that started to shift the conversation of the draft of like, how many more teams can trade in? Is anyone going to trade in? Can the Raiders trade in? What are the Saints going to do? So that led to the chaos of the next 3 days. Really, the next 72 hours were just nonstop. But all in all, I also put that there because the Steelers draft, I loved just about every single pick. I think I'm becoming a quasi Steelers fan now because you also have to include in this the DK Metcalf draft or the trade. He was their second round pick this year.
Yeah,
So
that's
to
a
me,
good
you
point.
include that in their draft. They got DK Metcalf in the second round. Then they got Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa. They don't have Najee Harris there anymore. And Jalen Warren's not, he's a good asset to have, but he's not a 3 down back. You get Jack Sawyer, my guy, out of Ohio State. He fits the Pittsburgh Steeler way perfectly. He said, and Derek Harmon, another one. He modeled his game after Cam Hayward. Now he's teammates, and he's going to be lining up right next to Cam Hayward. You've got Jack Sawyer, and then Will Howard. I love him at quarterback. He's a Pennsylvania kid. I didn't think he said his family is Eagles fans, but they are now going to convert Steeler fans. But just I love all of those picks. I loved Will Howard. I think you and I were both combined for people that are on a same show together. We were the highest I've heard anybody. I didn't hear
Yeah.
anybody really talking about Will Howard. Pat McAfee was beating the drum for Will Howard after the national championship game. Besides that, I mean, there was really no talk about it. Then you see him. I watched him on John Gruden's whatever
QB
show
camp.
Gruden has now. He was great. Yeah, the QB camp, his personality, everything he has. The guys seem to flock towards him as a leader. He seems like that kind of guy. So I love the Steelers draft, every part of it, especially the later the draft went. But yeah, that whoa moment was absolutely them passing on.
And really, it shows you with these two woes of the draft, it's also two franchises that were heavily linked to Shador and two franchises that picked a lot of guys that either had like high character or guys with stories like Harmon, where it's like you're playing for something, you're persevering through something. Like there's something about your story, like Jake Beck, like all these guys. And it's not to say that Shador isn't a good guy or Shador isn't, but it is to say that they looked at guys where it's like you're really fighting. You weren't handed anything, you don't have everything, you're still fighting for it. Where it seemed like maybe Shador was the antithesis of the drafts that the Steelers and Raiders had. So really interesting common through line for two teams that were heavily linked to Shador Sanders through this process. Most intriguing trade. I have 7 of them, but I'll do it with one team, and that was the Houston Texans. I did a complete kind of breakdown about what the Houston Texans did. I also found an image on Twitter where this guy had this draft calculator and it showed like all the different draft charts. Okay. I don't want to bore you with all of the selections that went in and out for the Houston Texans during this process, but they essentially came out through 7 trades. They came out with a value of about, I want to say, anywhere from a late 3rd round pick to a mid 6th round pick. So what they began the draft with in the terms of draft assets in the next 2 years and what they exited with, they got a slightly favorable value back. Like I said, mid 6th to a late 3rd. That sounds like a good draft overall. And again, if you wanted me to tell you all of the trades, I could, but I truly don't want to bore anybody here. But obviously, the New York Giants one was the big one. They did that really weird trade with what was it, the Browns before the draft, where they gave up 2 5th round picks for 2 6th and a 7th. And I was like,
On the day
okay.
before, just random out of
No,
nowhere.
the
Like,
day of, it was like an
what do we?
hour before the draft, and
Was
they
it?
were like,
No.
why don't we just do this? It was like,
You guys
okay.
bored? What are you doing?
So here's the thing. The reason why I'm so intrigued with it is because I spent, Jimmy, no joke, about 2.5 hours going through their trades and then thinking about what
Mhm.
I thought about their trades. They came up positive, which is generally a good thing. But Jimmy, the picks that came and went through their building that allowed them to have this positive draft were picks. It was picks 90, 104, 124, and like 167, I think. I meant to pull it. This is the one thing I didn't do. Actually, I have it right here. Why am I even? I'm so sorry. I actually have this available to me at the tip of my fingers. It was the 99th pick, the 102nd pick, the 142nd pick, and the 179th pick, and the 216th pick. All five of those picks were picks that they acquired and then sent back out the door. So they were essentially transient for it. And in turn, through all their deals, they got a positive value draft in the end in terms of all of the draft, pick rating scales. My question is, was it worth giving up? Like, was it worth, the cost value to get that was number 99, 102, 142, 179, and 216. I can understand it's like if you never had those picks at all, but it still cost you 97, 160, or excuse me, 99, 102, 142, 179, and 216. So for me, it's a very philosophical question of, and I think I know what side I come on to it. It's, is it better to be better than where you started? Or is the cost actually matter in terms of evaluating it? Because it's like this, Jimmy, if we started this podcast and you had $40, now you have $80. That's pretty good, right? You doubled up your money.
Yeah.
But what if I said that it cost you $200 to make that $80? Now you still net plus 40, but you had $200 and you spent it to gain $40. That's kind of where
Yeah.
I'm at with it. It felt like that they spent $200 to gain $40. And yes, they were given that $200 for free, but just keep the $200. Why make all these
Yeah.
moves and just net barely positive? Again, you let essentially a third, two fourths, and a fifth go through in and out your door to improve your draft pick by maybe at best a late third rounder. I'm the Texans from the first trade that they made to the other ones. I get that they came out positive. I did not like their process. I really did not.
And I wonder with that if they did all that with the hopes of another or maybe some other deals going through and they all didn't. So they were kind of stuck. And that's what they ended up doing. I don't know.
Also,
You know, where
also,
they
they gained the Giants' third round pick next year, but they ended up trading their own fifth round pick to the Browns 2 years from now and their third round pick next year. So they just net even. Like, yeah, they'll move up from Texans to Giants.
yeah.
Sure, maybe. You never know what can happen. Maybe the Texans are 9-8 and the Giants are 8-9 next year. You don't know. So it's just I just honestly, I get they were positive. It felt like they lost all these trades, in my opinion. But I still like their draft, to be honest. Like Higgins, I think, was actually a bigger stud than I realized. They got an offensive lineman. They picked Jalen Knoll to like combine the two Iowa State receivers. I hated the Woody Marks trade. I cannot believe that they traded their third round pick and a pick this year, the third round pick next year and a pick this year to trade up for Woody Marks. Blew my mind. Anyways, I'm done, Jimmy. It still fascinates me. But that was my most intriguing trade, was just the millions of trades the Texans made. And I don't think that they got that much better for what they spent to do it.
Yeah. And just going to the Higgins, before the draft, it was talked about like he is like Pet McMillan, but just kind of him light. The more I look and where he went to the Texans with CJ Stroud, I think it kind of like Higgins moving forward more than Roy McMillan.
Wow. I actually may agree with you when it's all said and done, but I'm not ready to say that now. I didn't know this until like 2 days ago. Do you know where Jaden Higgins started his college football career? Because it wasn't Iowa State.
No.
Eastern Kentucky University.
Wow.
I had no idea. I didn't get to
How about
obviously I didn't get to Jaden Higgins in my scouting report process,
yeah,
but I found that out at the last thing. I was like, oh, because that's in our backyard. I mean, I've lived in Richmond
yeah.
forever, so yeah, that's so crazy. Anyways, that was my woe trade or my trade of most interesting trade of the draft weekend. What was yours?
To me, it's the Falcons trade with the Rams to go back up into the first round to get James Pierce Jr. The big thing that I took away was Les Snead and his sneaky ways. He did it again. Somehow he got another first round pick. So the Falcons trade back up. They took in the first round.
Now,
Let me
hold
just
on,
make
hold
sure
on, hold
Jalen
on.
Walker.
Are you talking about the Rams or the Falcons? Because I thought I claimed the Falcons.
No, you did.
Okay,
But I'm
all
just
right.
saying, like that's what the Falcons did. They traded it. They already
Correct.
got
Yes,
Jalen Walker.
yes, they
Then they
did.
got James Pierce. But with the Rams, I like this because you're acquiring more picks into next year. We don't know the future of Matt Stafford, so you're getting more picks. And there for a while, the Rams didn't have any picks for the Matt Stafford trade, the Jalen Ramsey trade. They win a Super Bowl out of it, so it's good. So now they're slowly starting to rebuild that process of not starting over, but they need to recoup all the picks that they've gotten rid of through trades.
Hmm.
Now I will say I wasn't a big fan of the second round pick they got, so they received the 46th pick. What they got Terrence Ferguson, the tight end out of Oregon. I
Hmm.
like Ferguson, but for me personally, I liked Arroyo ahead of him. They could have gotten Arroyo at that spot. Maybe it's some durability concerns. Now Ferguson, he put up some numbers. He was a playmaker for Oregon. Dylan Gabriel and him. So I don't hate the pick, but just at tight end, if you have those guys there, I would take Arroyo, me personally, 10 out of 10 times. So just wasn't as big a fan of that. But just I love this trade because they're acquiring a first round pick for next year. So to me, that was an intriguing trade at the end of the night to see, okay, what kind of magic can Les Snead and the Rams kind of get into with this next year?
And it seems like that we surprisingly kind of like similar tight ends. Jake Ferguson seems more like a Rams tight end, like that Tyler Higbee, that Tyler Warren. Are you a big white guy and can you run kind of fast? You can. We like
Yeah,
you.
tatted up white guy. Yeah,
Yeah,
that Tyler Higbee, tatted up white guy. There you go.
they love them. They're like, you're our type of guy. And then there are the tight ends that aren't, that are more swift and athletic, which leads us to our next superlative, which is the most surprising rise. And I tried not to do this throughout the draft process. I tried to stick to draft day. And I think the most surprising rise for me was Colston Loveland going not only to be the first tight end off the board, but to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. There are a lot of guys that rose through this process that you could point to from A to B, but just for draft night, I wouldn't have imagined thinking that Colston Loveland would be a top 10 pick. I'm not to say that I don't like the fit. I really like Colston Loveland. In fact, I actually spread bad information. For some reason, I thought he broke his leg the McCarthy year and had to come back. Like I looked it up and down. I could not find out who that guy was. That McCarthy was thrown to. I don't know if it was Eric All Jr. or like who it could have been, but I could not find it. But I've liked Colston Loveland for a couple of years. He is very athletic. He is a pass catching tight end. He is perfect if you are actually going to use a tight end in your offense. You're not just going to be Arthur Smith, get Kyle Pitt. I'm angry. Get Kyle Pitts and say, well, I run a two running back, run the ball 80% of the time scheme. You're going to block. That's not how you use Kyle Pitts. And that's not how you use Colston Loveland. Ben Johnson got a guy that he is going to use like a wide receiver, and that makes me like Loveland a little bit more. I still think I think this is the best juice out of the squeeze that you're going to get. I like that term. When it comes to the tight end position in the first round, I don't like taking tight ends in the first round, especially this high in the draft. But I like the situation he went to. And overall, I like the Bears draft. I mean, to get Luther Burden in the second round, a guy that I had in my top 10. I mean, you just can't go wrong with it. I mean, the guy's an absolute stud. I think he's going to be DJ Moore's replacement long term. He's a huge yak guy. He's the most talented. I honestly think he's the most talented player on their offense day one, like except for Caleb Williams. I think he's more talented than DJ. I think he's more talented than Rome. I think he's more talented than Colston. It's just, can you get the best out of him is the question. Then the rest of their draft, like Trupilo, we'll see if he can stand upright. Shamar Turner's a good into the second round pick. But yeah, I was really surprised to see Colston Loveland rise into the top 10 of the draft. I didn't think that was possible, but it was.
To me, my biggest riser was New Orleans Saints pick Tyler Shuck
Ooh, shucky
going
boy.
as early as going as early as he did in the second round. I didn't see him mocked there. I didn't see anyone have him that high. To me, he was in that list of secondary quarterbacks where I had Cam Ward one, and then to me it was Will Howard, Shuck. You could throw Jalen Milroy, even
Dart
Kyle
was your number
McCord.
two guy.
I really liked Dart. That's who it was. It was Dart, and then
Mhm.
the rest of those guys were kind of jumbled up together. But I just in the second round, you're going to go with Tyler Shuck. You don't know it doesn't look good for Derek Carr this year. We haven't really it's kind of been kind of hush hush. No one's really discussed. Like we don't know what it is, but it's not looking promising, especially for the future. So you go with Tyler Shuck in the second round. I didn't understand it. Not that I would have taken Shador in round two necessarily, but why take Shuck there when I feel like his ceiling is no higher than what a Will Howard ceiling could be. Even I was higher on Kyle McCord just because he put up pretty good numbers in college. I believe he has the most passing yards in a season in ACC history
Yeah, that
after what
sounds
he did
right.
at Syracuse. Um, and again, you're not. That doesn't mean I say take those guys at that spot in round two. I just didn't understand taking him there. That was just kind of confusing. No, I Dylan Gabriel was another one where you go, when the third round to me, Shuck going in the second round was more surprising.
See,
Um, but the rest of their draft, they were another one where. Go ahead.
no, you continue. Finish what you're saying.
Just Kelvin Banks in the first round. I think he could be a solid tackle. But again, the Saints, I just as a team, there's not much to be excited about. They've got Kamara, he's getting old. They've got Olave, can he even stay healthy? It's so I look at their draft and it's like, all right, Kelvin Banks, he could be solid, but they were one of the few teams. They didn't really do much with the rest of the interior. They had a defensive tackle they drafted. They took an edge in the seventh round, but they really, I don't know. I was very on their draft, and Tyler Shuck being right there at pick number two that they had was a glaring issue.
See, I was actually more shocked about the Gabriel pick because there's a kind of a backup ceiling with him probably
Mm-hmm.
where even though he's a great college quarterback, don't get me wrong, he could be good in the NFL. I just, that's what everybody labeled him when he got picked. Where Shuck, the one thing it's a contradiction. I wanted to not like the Saints draft, and it's not my top half of favorite drafts, but I don't have him at the bottom because, like, at least with ninth overall, I wasn't huge on Kelvin Banks, but I said he's a developmental player. And I said before the Saints need to pick a developmental player. They need to develop now. It's over. Like, it is over. You are not going to be like this iteration, the Drew Brees, the 2017 class with Kamara, Ramchek, and all those. It's dead and gone. It's
Yeah.
time to move on. So I like that in the first round, they at least pick a high upside developmental player. I liked that. Shuck, I didn't like just because of the age thing, but then it makes sense. If Drew Brees is going to be out all year long, at least Shuck was like a elite 11 guy, whatever. I don't really think a 26-year-old you can rely on his like past, but he's 26. He's going to come in, and if he has to be a starter right away, I think they just looked at it and said, who's a guy? That's why I thought the second round was way too high to pick a guy like this. But
Yeah.
you need a starter right away. Why pick a 20-year-old kid that's coming in? A 26-year-old is like close to an adult. Like it's really close to getting a guy that really knows where he is in life. And then the rest of their picks, I'm not going to pretend like I know a ton about them, but I did look on ESPN, and almost every single pick that they picked them later than they were supposed to go. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
one thing I'll give him. Like every pick, it was like this guy went 109, he was ranked 83. Like this guy went 94, he was ranked, 67, right? Like at least there's an argument that they got good value at their picks, but I'm not going to pretend like I was able to scout a lot of them. So I'm with you with him rising to that point, but the Saints kind of makes sense. Okay. Most surprising fall. I forgot what my parameters for this one is. Like I said, I tried to make it all make sense to me. I actually didn't think there were a ton of guys that fell that were surprising outside of Shador, obviously. But I went with Trey Amos, the cornerback out of Ole Miss that ended up going to the Commanders at the end of the second round. I'm missing something with the drop of Trey Amos because he was considered to be not in that first class of corner, but in that second class of corner. He ran a bad shuttle. He wasn't super explosive, but he had a great 40, and he's a guy that you could put at outside corner. He's physical, and you can put him out there with some bigger receivers. He can run and play the ball against them. Well, if you look at the other corners, there were three corners that went in the second round after it being so important to get them. Two of them were hurt. One of them was Will Johnson, who was injured, like going into this process. And the other one, I don't know if you know it off the top of your head. I'm pulling it up right now just because it completely left my mind. But the other one was also injured as well. Sorry for the bad radio. It was Benjamin Morrison. He was a guy that got hurt at Notre Dame last year. And so then Amos goes. And then the next corners that go are like Darian Porter, who's a project. AZ Thomas dropped because of the 40. And Siobhan Revel, who was also hurt but tested really well. So like Amos is the only guy that tested well, wasn't hurt, and no reported off the field stuff. And so you've got a corner with all of these projections. And I guess just for me, Jimmy, Green Bay needed a corner. There were tons of teams that didn't get a first round pick at cornerback. And, like Amos was able to fall all the way to the end of the second. So I was really surprised with all of the needs, and there seemed to be no flags that Amos was, of all the corners, the one that fell.
Yeah, that's surprising with him. Was it off the field? Was it character
I
issues
didn't
that
hear
caused him?
anything like that. It just kind of was like,
Yeah,
oh,
he
look how
wasn't
lucky
a
we got.
name. Yeah. Like the Will Johnson, that made more sense because of the injury.
Right.
But even still with him falling, like that was, to me, that was still surprising. But yeah, Amos going that late, it was kind of head scratching, you know?
Right. At least Mike Green, like, is someone that is surprised he fell that far. But then it's like, okay, was the
Yeah,
off field stuff more of red flags for
sure.
teams? Will Johnson, Benjamin Morrison, all those guys. Yeah, Amos was the one where you couldn't point to injuries and you couldn't point to off field stuff and you couldn't point to athletic testing. Okay, so what was it?
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's why
Yeah.
it was the most surprising fall to me.
My surprising fall kind of parlays with your riser in tight end. To me, Tyler Warren falling to the Colts was a
Good
surprise.
pick.
We're on the same wavelength here. It was thought all along Tyler Warren was going to be top 10, and then Loveland would just go wherever the next tight end was needed, probably still top end of the draft. But I love the pick there with Tyler Warren. I'm curious how many of their mock draft scenarios they do in their worm, how many times he fell to them. And was it just like an understood, like, oh, yeah, said to pick him now? There's no way he should be here. And so you get, assuming, Anthony Richardson, a guy that can do a lot of different things on offense. He can be your security blanket. He can get the dump offs, do whatever. So I love that pick. I love the fact that he fell to him because we've talked about on the pre-draft shows leading up to when we were going over tight ends and talking with the Colts that they've had so many different
Oh, yeah.
tight ends over the years, really since Dallas Clark. But you see, like Mo Alley Cox, oh, he's huge. He's got so much potential. He was a basketball player. And then they had Jelani Woods, kind of the same thing. They're both like 6'7", but they don't throw them the ball. They don't do anything with their tight end. So I think this can be the guy to solidify where you have Josh Downs, you've got Pittman, you've got Alec Pierce. So they seem to have all the weapons you need. You've got Jonathan Taylor, and a pick that I really like that they had was DJ Giddens late in the draft, running back out of
Yeah.
Kansas State. He could be one, and we've seen with Jonathan Taylor, he's not gonna play 17 games. At some point during the year, there's gonna be something with really every running back. It
I was going to
seems
say,
like.
don't say that. I have him in
But I
fantasy.
love, yeah. But then the next week he comes back from his injury, he'll get you 3 touchdowns and a buck 75. And I also like they got my guy JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State.
Yep.
Love him as an edge rusher. Also like the Riley Leonard pick. Curious, he was one that didn't really get any talk going into
No.
the draft process with the year
Mhm.
that he had at Notre Dame. He seems like he seems like the type that would be able to. We talked about Shador. Can you buy into being a backup? Riley Leonard seems like he'll come in and he's fine being a backup, but he also has that similar style play. He's not Anthony Richardson, but if they needed to move him in, they could run similar packages with Riley Leonard as they do with Anthony Richardson. We saw Riley Leonard had
That's right.
double
Yeah.
digit rushing touchdowns last year. I don't remember how many, but he was great running the ball. We saw in the college football playoff, I think he had 3 touchdowns in one of the games rushing. So
Yeah.
just all
He
in all,
yeah, he
I like the
rushed
Colts
for
draft with
906 yards and 17 touchdowns. Wow.
yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
realize that.
He was a monster. So again, you look at the fit that they have, and it's like, okay, if we do end up going to that backup, and I forget who else they brought in the offseason. They brought someone else in to
Daniel
compete with.
Jones.
Oh, it's Daniel Jones. Yeah,
Indiana
and he
Jones,
again,
baby.
he's another one. Yeah, he's another one where now he's had some injury concerns, but I feel like that he's still a physical runner. He doesn't get enough credit for being the runner he is. So now they've got 3 quarterbacks that can all play similar styles as far as not needing to
That's
change
true.
much.
Hmm.
So
Don't have to
I
change the
like what the
playbook.
Colts did. Yeah, that Tyler Warren fell to them. I'm pumped to see what he can do in that offense. And now Anthony Richardson really has no excuses. You have all the weapons now, guy. Let's see what you can do
Time
with
to
them.
put it together. Yeah, I was not glad. I was more happy that my evaluation, like I saw tons of people, Jimmy, have him as not only a top 10 player in this class, but like a tier 2 player. Like after Carter and Graham and Hunter, it was like Genty, Warren, and this. And I was just like, man, I just don't see it. I got nervous. I was like, I don't see it in this guy. So I was not happy to see him drop. I'm not, like I don't think of it that way. I was just more glad that maybe my evaluation was closer to an NFL's evaluation of a guy like Warren, but he went to the perfect place. Get this though. They picked in their draft picks, they picked Big 10, Big 10, Big 10 first 3 picks. Penn State, Ohio State, Minnesota. So this isn't like UCLA, Oregon, something like that. These are like traditional Big 10 teams.
Yeah.
Iowa State, Kansas State, which is in that Midwest Central Plains area, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, and then 1 pick from Alabama. They really went area with their draft. They were like, we're going to trust these up north kids, these Central Plains kids, these Midwestern kids, these Big Ten schools, and that's what we're going to go with, except for our big defensive tackle out of Alabama. And like, that's where we'll get our defensive tackle everywhere else. I just thought that was really interesting. On
Yeah.
to we only have 4 superlatives left, Jimmy, and we are putting an end to the 2025 NFL draft. I can't believe it. Most impact year 1 offense. Jimmy, I don't think you could guess this if I gave you 6 tries. I will go, if I gave you 6 tries, I'm going to go with the 7th overall pick in Armand Membu. I think that he
Ooh.
is going to have the most singular impact on winning on offense this year in football. I think Tatoria McMillan is a guy that can, like affect Bryce Young the most. I think Travis Hunter could have potentially the highest stats like on that. But I wanted to go with someone, especially where we drafted teams, we could only take so many. I still love Armand Membu here because there are 2 things that he can do for these Jets. He is going to come in, plug and play at right tackle right away. I think that except for the great pass rushers of the league, he's going to be able to pass block immediately. And even more so, I think he's going to be able to run block, especially out in space. I believe that him being there is going to give you the best look at Justin Fields. And if Justin Fields can handle it, he is then if Justin Fields, if the time that Armand Membu gives Justin Fields elevates Justin Fields to the guy that we thought he would be 4 years ago out of Ohio State, then we're talking about a huge, huge impact that Membu's making. Not to mention, he was arguably the best run blocker in the class, Armand Membu. And then he comes out, which just reminds me, I don't think Willie Lampkin got drafted. I'm going to have to look up to see if he signed anywhere. But Armand Membu pulling in space, run blocking, zone, all that. He is a nightmare out in front. He's going to be blocking for Garrett Wilson on screens. More importantly, what he's going to do for Breece Hall and Brashawn Allen, I think, Braylon Allen in that backfield.
Braylon.
I,
Yeah.
I think that underratedly, it's almost like I can't see the picture of my puzzle. And then you put the last piece in and you're like, that put it all together. I truly believe that Armand Membo is the difference between a lackluster and a good Jets offense in 2025.
Yeah. Going to Willie Lampkin, I think you're going to like where he went. The Rams signed him as an undrafted free
I,
agent.
I love it because They took a chance on Aaron Donald as a small player, and that's what I said. What if you needed to stop Aaron Donald? I really hope he makes the Rams. But also, I don't want to get too far into it, but I really like the Jets draft too. Like I said with you, Jimmy, I don't think that there were a bunch of like a ton of bad drafts by any means. And in fact, I thought that the Jets had one of the better drafts to get Mason Taylor in the second round after you were linked to Tyler Warren. I much rather would have Mimbu and Taylor than Warren and one of these tier two offensive tackles. Like I really would. AZ Thomas, who dropped, great pick. They traded up to get Tyler Barron at the end at edge. So I was a big fan of the Jets, and I really love the Mimbu pick. I think that's going to end up being a steal for the Jets long term.
I like the outside the box thinking. With most impactful player on offense, everyone thinks you're going skill guy, not so fast.
Not so
We're going
fast, my friend.
tackle. My pick is, and I had to fight with this one. I had a couple other picks, but I think I could trust the process with this. I'm going to go Emeka Iboka with the Bucks as the most impactful
Yep.
rookie on offense this year. And I know what you're thinking. They've got Mike Evans, they've got Chris Godwin, they've got Bucky Irving, they've got Kate Otten. Where is he going to fit? Iboka will come in and he will find his place. And I don't want to sound, it sounds bad putting it out there, but we've seen the history of Chris Godwin and his injuries.
Yeah.
He's not that reliable, and he's coming off a pretty serious knee injury again. So it's not his first one. And then you've got Mike Evans. He's also due to miss a couple games due to
He is.
hamstring or groin at some point during the year. It happens. And then he cocomes back and he somehow gets 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. But I think Iboka will be able to. And I am one of the Jalen McMillan dynasty owners, so I was not happy in
Oh,
that
I'm
way
sure you weren't.
because he was set up for success. I mean, he was the guy, the sleeper last year. Pick him up, hold on to him. And of course, they draft Iboka. But maybe they'll just be the duo in a couple years when Evans and Godwin are gone. But I like Iboka to potentially be a rookie of the year candidate with that offense. Baker's going to be throwing all around the field. And just with the fact that you don't know of the other two receivers, they're not going to be out there, both of them, for all 17 games. And Iboka is the one who can come in day one and not have to treat him like a rookie. He's going to come in. He has the full route tree. He could play inside, outside if you need him to. So I think he's going to be a great offensive threat for them in the first year. So overall, though, for their draft that the Bucks had, all in all, I liked it. I like that they also got Tez Johnson at the end of the draft. He's a shorter, speedier receiver. I mean, again, I don't know where he's going to go. They have a ton of receivers already, but just to get him late in the draft, he's a speedy guy. He didn't test well, but when you watch the Oregon games, he looks fast on the field. Could just be the perception with the Oregon uniforms. I think that's why they wear those bright colors. Makes you look faster when you're out there on the field.
Yeah.
But
No, finish up.
they were the Bucks draft. There wasn't anything spectacular. I like the Iboka pick at the top, but the rest of it, they wasn't anything great. But Light, their GM, he's another one that he's starting to get up there at the top, where it's like, okay, he's another one where we just have to trust what Matt Light does, and I like the Iboka.
Yeah, I thought that the Bucks had kind of a forgettable draft. However, Emeka Egbuka could be the next Amon-Ra St. Brown. He may fall a little short of that, but that potential is there. Benjamin Morrison was a first-round corner until he got hurt. Jacob Parrish is they needed cornerbacks. They got thrown on like crazy, and Jacob Parrish ran the fourth fastest 40-yard dash at the combine. So for all cornerbacks. So and then Tez Johnson to bookend it with another wide receiver. I think it was just one of those where we're going to get Baker the top end help he needs, and we're going to give the defense the depth of the help that it needs. So they had another draft that was ho hum, but I think was effective, and I think Emeka Egbuka is a perfect candidate for a draft like this, for a superlative like this. Most impact year one defense. It's another one I'm going to cheat on with you. I'm actually going to cover two separate categories as well as this one. So buckle in. Jalen Walker, the linebacker from Georgia. Can't believe he slipped to 15. All of the rumblings were that every team in the top 10 loved his character. But something, I guess it was the 6'1" frame, not being positionless, more of a tweener than a combo guy. He ends up falling to Atlanta at 15. They stay pat. They get arguably the best off-ball linebacker of the draft and arguably the second best edge rusher of the draft in Jalen Walker for a defense that has been starving for speed and rush off of the edge. But if that wasn't enough, if he's not capable enough, the guy that other people thought could be the second best edge rusher in this draft was James Pierce Jr., a guy that was a number one overall pick candidate coming into this year that just so happened to drop. He's been looked at since his freshman year. They traded a first round pick next year to go up from 46 to 26 to take Pierce. But the under talked about thing that they did, Jimmy, and they don't mention this in this trade. They all want to say, oh, they gave up a first. Nobody mentions this part. They traded their seventh round pick for the Rams' late third round pick. So they jumped up 141 spots in the draft this year, along with jumping the 20 spots from 46 to 26. So they made two incredibly high jumps to get into this position. Yes, they spent a first round pick to do it, but with their third round pick, now they did trade a fifth round pick next year as well. So they traded a fifth round pick and a first round pick next year to make all this happen. So we'll see if it's worth it. But they picked Xavier Watts, who almost consensusly was the number 2 safety in this class. And they picked him late in the third round because he was kind of an average tester. But you went in 1 year, you addressed a problem that had been for over half of a decade your biggest problem in pass rush. You get Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. from the SEC to stay close to home. And then you go and get Xavier Watts, who people were saying was a Jesse Bates clone. You've completely revamped this defense in 1 year, and you give Michael Penix and this team a shot at the wild card, if not the division next year, lessening the impact of the first round pick you gave up. So I think the year one impact of Jalen Walker is going to be huge, but really this is what the new face Falcons are going to look like off the edges and now in the secondary as well.
My pick for most impactful defensive player, we're going out west to the mountains, the Broncos, Jahdae Barron.
Yes.
That the Broncos draft, I love their draft, but I was just looking at their defense. That secondary, good luck, Patrick Mahomes.
No fly zone.
They have got Patrick Surtain, PS2, I believe the highest paid corner in the league.
Unless defensive player of the year, that's for sure.
Yeah. So they've got him. They also signed Talanoa Hufanga from my Niners and Dre Greenlaw from my Niners. Mm-hmm. So they got Hufanga, they've got Riley Moss, they've got Jahdae Barron, Patrick Surtain. Where are you going to go with the ball? You can't go anywhere. So adding Jahdae Barron, who's got ball skills, he can play inside if he needs to. I absolutely love that pick. And again, you have to play with what's in your division. You've got Patrick Mahomes. Now, not throwing the ball around as much, but you've got Patrick Mahomes, the greatest quarterback on planet Earth right now in your division. You're doing everything you can. And Justin Herbert in their division, too. So, and I guess I should mention Geno Smith. He's also a quarterback that plays.
And also ran.
I do have to mention him. But he's not at that level. But yeah, I love that Jahdae Barron pick. I think that he is going to be right up there with defensive rookie of the year, I should say. But I think my favorite pick of the draft for the Broncos is their running back that they got out of UCF, potentially Bucky Irving 2.0, RJ Harvey, the running back that they got. They lost Javonte Williams in the offseason. So RJ Harvey, there's a few other guys that he'll be in competition with. I do still like Audric Estime. They didn't really use him much last year, but I think he's still got potential. But they've got Jahdae Barron, RJ Harvey, and they took an edge guy. They took a tight end late. They also took a punter. Shout out to the Broncos taking a punter in the draft. So all in all, I think Jahdae Barron, RJ Harvey for your first 2 picks were incredible for the Broncos.
When we did our mock draft, I said that for the Broncos, I was targeting Jahdae Barron, but you took him at Miami at 13, which we'll see if Miami will rue that day. I remember looking at the depth chart, and the only position on the defense that they did not invest either true free agent capital or draft capital in was at nickelback. And Jahdae Barron was considered by far the most qualified or overqualified nickelback in this draft. And I was like, man, if they get him, it is going to be a very, very hard defense to pass on. I think the Broncos may end up with the best pass defense in football next year. It is time for the losers and winners of this year's draft. Least favorite team draft, favorite team draft. I don't like to end on a sour note, so I will go with my least favorite draft. My least favorite draft of the 2025 NFL draft class is the Green Bay Packers draft.
Oh, no.
There had to be a team
Your
for
Packers.
My poor Packers. It's my team. Matthew Golden was the correct choice and the best choice that could have been made at that 23 spot. I would have preferred Luther Burden, but it's still a 4.29 wide receiver who dropped in the draft. I'm completely fine with that. Every pick after had me wondering if this GM is truly going to change the course of this team. We picked Anthony Belton in the second round when Trey Amos was still on the board. Yes, a big offensive lineman that can run block has always been a problem for the Packers. We have one of the lightest offensive lines in the entire league. It's great for pass protection, but at goal line stands, it never works. I was very happy to hear that Belton was the pick because I thought that he would come in and be like a Mekhi Becton-esque guard, the way that Mekhi Becton helped the Eagles' offensive line play into the Super Bowl. But the rumors immediately after was he was going to challenge Rasheed Walker at the left tackle position. This is not a excuse me. This is not a developmental prospect. This is a 24-year-old, 331-pound tackle. If he wasn't a top left tackle prospect now, he's not going to be one in the future. He just is who he is. So you drafted a guy to come play left tackle that's not going to be able to handle the position. But if you move him immediately to guard, I'm fine. Savion Williams in the third round. Great athlete. You just picked a second wide receiver in a team loaded with receivers, a guy that gets compared a lot to like your Cordero Patterson or this and that. You picked a gadget player and a kick returner in the third round. I hope he works out and is more than that. I would be over the moon if he was, but facts are facts that right this second, that's what he is. I hope he's more, but that's what you got in the third round. Then you got defensive depth throughout the later parts of the, day three, and that's great. But you're looking at a team, Jimmy, that in my opinion is the worst top three team in the NFL. And what I mean by that is, who are your top three players on your team? For your Niners, you could say Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, say Brock Purdy. Okay. That's a pretty good three, right?
Yeah.
Dallas Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons. Let's go just Dak Prescott off the top of my head. That's pretty good. I'd love to have that three. You go
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, like those guys. That's really good. I like to have that. The Packers have Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney, maybe Jordan Love, if he's truly
You
that
would have
good.
to do Jordan Love.
Yeah. And so, how many teams in the NFL, like, would you trade your Niners for those three?
No.
No. Would
I
you
don't even know
trade
if I would trade the next three for the Niners. That would be in that next big three. I
Okay,
don't
that
even
was
think
a
I would do
little
that for
harsh.
them.
That was a little harsh. But the point is that the top end talent is falling so precipitously for the Packers. It's peeling off like bad paint. And Jimmy, the thing is that he's not hitting on the other picks. Josh Myers was picked one pick ahead of Creed Humphrey by the Packers. He's out. He's in like Las Vegas or something. Eric Stokes, first round. That was a second round pick. Eric Stokes, first round pick out of Georgia, plays for the Raiders now. He did not make it to a second contract with the Packers. There are several top picks not making it to their second contract with Green Bay, and their talent is falling and falling and falling. So in a draft where you need, Golden was a great pick. You need to start hitting talent, hitting positions of need, and start re-stockpiling. You took two big risks. And I don't think this team's in the position to do that. So the Packers had my least favorite draft of the 2025 NFL draft.
I went with the Minnesota Vikings. Now they only had, I believe, five picks total in the draft. Yeah, and they only had two picks in the top 100 and some odd, I think 102 picks. So they had a first round pick and a third round pick. Then they had a five and two sixes. So there already wasn't a ton they could do with the draft. So kind of in a way, as we've been mentioning, that there weren't a ton of just flat out terrible drafts. But the Vikings, I would say it's just more of a, like, okay, they took Donovan Jackson, a guard, in the first round out of Ohio State. They took him late in the first. Ty Felton, the receiver out of Maryland, he's a speedster, had a great 10-yard split, a great 40. He could play inside, outside. They've got their number one and their number two, Addison and Jefferson. There's no question. They've got their tight end. So maybe, they have Jalen Naylor. They've had that rotating guy at the
It was
third. A couple
good.
years ago was KJ Osborne. Yeah, and so maybe Ty Felton can do that. He can come in and just be an explosive guy that you use in the slot. But the rest of it, I don't know. To me, it was just a plain draft. None of the names really jump out to me.
No, I agree with you. Donovan Jackson, sure. I'm fine with that as a first round pick because you're going to have to protect JJ McCarthy. And I think that getting him help on the offensive line is great. The rest of their picks, it felt like they just set them on fire. Like, we'll see if King, the linebacker out of Penn State's good. We'll see if the edge rusher from Georgia is as good as he was with the Dogs. But overall, like that's what happens when you don't have a lot of picks. And then when you pick a receiver in the third round, I mean, I was sickening to me. Like that's the last thing that you needed to spend your capital on. So I was also overwhelmed with the Vikings draft. So I think that's a good selection. My favorite team draft or the best team draft of 2025. I started off with the Kansas City Chiefs and one of the only teams in the league that I cannot stand more. We talked about the Vikings now. We've talked about the Chiefs. The number one draft of 2025 was the San Francisco 49ers. And I hate to say
Take it.
that. And I hate that that's the way it is. What I thought the Niners did was absolutely incredible in terms of they took it on the chin this offseason. They had a very bad 2024, well below the Niners standards that they had, and they turned around and they lost pretty much everybody of name that they had. And people were leaving them for dead. And I thought that, wow, whatever they're going to do in this draft, they better make it work. What I love that the San Francisco 49ers did, they said, we have a thing in San Francisco. Over the last 15 years, we've had one of the best front sevens in football, essentially since the moment Jim Harbaugh and Patrick Willis got there until today. And they said, if there's one thing that's waning or the one thing that we're going to fortify, it is the run defense. It is the front seven. It is bringing people to help support. What's the best thing you could possibly do? You know how I said quarterback enhancers, Jimmy? The best two players on your team are Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. How do you support them? You go out and you draft Mykel Williams, who is at least a day one run defender in the NFL with legit pass rushing upside. And round two, you get a 6'6", 330 plus pound defensive tackle from Texas to man the middle of your line in Alfred Collins. You get the linebacker from Oklahoma State, who they said has, poor man's Fred Warner comparisons in terms of being an ultra speedy sideline to sideline linebacker. The whole draft that they put together in San Francisco, and that includes CJ West of Indiana, who's a big 311-pound nose tackle, was that we are going to get Robert Saleh, the pieces in the front seven to make our front seven great again. And I thought that they killed it. They ripped the Band-Aid off in free agency. They lost all their guys, and they said, now what do we do? And they said, here's what we do. We attack and we build on the strength that we've had for over 15 years. I think that in 3 years, the San Francisco 49ers will have the best run defense in the NFL. And I think we'll look back at this draft as the catalyst that built it.
As a 49er fan, I endorse all those messages. I'm pretty excited about what that. Not as excited as I can be when you're a Niner fan and you lose all of those Pro Bowlers that are gone. There was a lot of them that left, but that's what happens.
New
So
ones are coming.
you rebuild. My favorite draft was the New York Football Giants.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
I love what they did. You take Abdul Carter again. What we talked about with the Browns. You have a chance of a generational player right in front of you. Don't get cute. Don't try to do anything with just take the guy. And they already have an incredible defensive line. So to add an Abdul Carter to that, don't think he's going to get to where Lawrence Taylor's number, but it doesn't matter. He can get his own 56 and make it his own. I love that they traded back up for Jackson Dart. I was high on Jackson Dart, thinking he was going to go number two for the last couple months. I think he had jumped Shador. He went number two. They go Darius Alexander, another defensive lineman to add up there with Sexy Dexy. He was one of those guys from Toledo, that a smaller school, but was getting a good push as far as the interior defensive lineman, as someone that, maybe isn't talked enough, not on the top of
Late
everyone's
first,
radar,
maybe.
playing at a small school like Toledo. Yeah, there for a while, he was talked to be, going in the late of the first round. And then my guy, Cam Scattaboo. Cam Scatterboom in New York. He's going to be great with Tyrone Tracy Jr. He's the speed. Cam Scattaboo can be the thunder, where they had Ahmad Bradshaw and Brandon Jacobs years ago. So I love the Giants draft. They really didn't go any skill at all. They got a tight end out of Nebraska
Thomas
late in
Fidone,
the
baby.
seventh round. Fidone the second out of Nebraska. So I I love what they did. I love that they secure up the defense with Abdul Carter and Alexander to add to a defense that was already up front was pretty solid last year. So then you had a guy like Cam Spaghetti, that's speaking straight to my heart.
You're totally right. I thought they gave up a little too much to move up for Dart to 9 spots. It cost them a 2/3, one next year, one this year. But overall, I mean, you get your quarterback that you want to develop. You stay at 3 and you get the guy that's going to be your franchise player. You get Alexander. You get, there was a player named Mimbow from Purdue. He was supposed to go in the
Yeah,
second round and as an offensive lineman, maybe third. He dropped all the way to the 5th round. You got Scadaboo, who's a legit timeshare with Tracy. Fedoni's just someone that New York fans are going to love. You're right. They did the draft the way you're supposed to do the draft. They did it the right way, and I think they'll reap the benefits. So, Jimmy, I've had you. We have gone officially 2 hours with the NFL Draft Review Show. This is it. We have covered. Sorry to the Ravens. Thought you had a great draft. Sorry to the Chargers. Thought you had a really good draft. The other one that had a team favorite, just to put a cap on my favorite draft of the year in San Francisco, it was kind of tied. I love the Bills. I love the Niners. I love the Cardinals. I love these there was another one. What did I say? Oh, and the Niners. Those four. It was like Cardinals,
yeah,
Bills, Niners, and who did I just say, Jimmy? There was one more that just completely dedicated Bills, Niners, I'm sorry, Cardinals. This is when it
Cardinals.
gets late into the thing. There's a fourth team: Bills, Niners, Cardinals, and another. I'm so sorry because I just had you on the defensive front side, but the Cardinals did the same thing. I love teams that just purely built their defenses up and like really focused on it, made it a priority, and knocked it completely out of the park. The Cardinals did the same. Jonathan Gannon took a chance on Walter Nolan's one infrastructure that maybe I wish he'd have gone to a bigger market or a more standing franchise. Nonetheless, they picked Will Johnson, who dropped. They got an edge rusher from Oregon in the 3rd round. They got a cornerback out of Ohio State, linebacker out of Ohio State. They went defense, defense, defense. I loved what they did. So those were my favorite drafts. So shout out to the Chargers, shout out to the Ravens, shout out to the Cardinals, and shout out to the Panthers. I didn't know McMillan and Bryce Young were such good friends. That makes a lot of sense on why that combo happened. And then they picked 2 edge rushers from the SEC, I think, in two and three. So my final thoughts was one of the rare times we talked about, Jimmy, how bad this draft was. I said this is a bad draft, bad draft, bad draft, especially in like the top of the 1st round. But for me saying it was such a bad draft, I thought that very few teams had bad drafts. This was a very pristine draft. It really seems like GMs are finally sort of starting to get it on how to team build, where to target positions, how to go in the draft. I thought it was a really good draft overall, and I think all these teams are going to get better because of their draft classes.
Yeah, something crazy. It stood out when you were talking about the Dolphins going over their draft. Imagine 2 years ago at the end of the 2023 season, if you told someone Quinn Ewers and Ollie Gordon are both going to be afterthoughts at the end of the 7th round.
Or they're on the
No
same
one, no one
team
would believe you.
in the
Yeah, and
pros.
they're
People would
they're
be
on
like,
the same team,
"Whoa,
and they're going to be competing for roster spots.
yeah."
That's where they're at. So that's just crazy how things can change just from year to year in the draft. But someone who didn't watch a lot of college football last year, they're like, what? Quinn Ewers, what, 7th? Ollie Gordon, he was supposed to win the Heisman this year. How did he go in the 7th round? Crazy.
Do you have any final thoughts? If not the draft, just our adventure together, your newfound love for the NFL draft. Is there any final thoughts? Like, because I couldn't appreciate you taking your time. Like, this was a last minute project, and you came on to do this with me. So I really do appreciate it, and thank you for helping me collect my thoughts on record for the 2025 NFL draft.
Well, it's been a ton of fun. I hope that we can do it again next year to go through it and just get into the nitty gritty of the draft. And there's a lot of teams that I'm excited to watch this year. I mean, looking at this, I was like, I think I'm becoming a Steelers fan with the draft that they had. Now I'm looking at the Broncos, and it's like the Broncos might just be the sleeper of the entire league this year. If Bo Nix can make that jump into year 2, I mean, I'm very excited about the Broncos, and because they have two of my Niners that I love, Dre Greenlaw and Ufunga. So I might just become a little bit of a Broncos fan too.
Well, you'll be able to, with our crash course of the NFL draft, the work that Jimmy put in. You'll now your NFL Sundays. Next time you see a guy in your fantasy lineup that's trending up, or you see someone on NFL Red Zone that scores that's a rookie, you'll be like, you know what? I actually remember them talking about that guy. You know what? I actually scouted that guy. I know that guy. That's so fun.
Yeah.
It does really pay off. So for the final installment for Jimmy and for Angelo Carriero, thank you so much for being a part of this journey. I'll go dark for a little bit. Hopefully come out with a podcast after that. But if not, at least this 2025 NFL draft was a fun ride to have with you. So thank you so much for viewing and watching. And until 2026, let's have fun with the 2025 NFL season.